Hello. Hi. Hi, Joseph.
Hi there.
Oh my God, I'm learning how to operate a stool.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
So we have a little short time here, like 10, 15 minutes. We're going to do audience questions, but I'm going to start us out. But if you have questions, be ready to have a hand up and we'll come to you. But I want to start out by asking you a question,
Yes.
Joseph. So obviously, we wrote this show together along with some other fantastic writers. We should name them really quickly. Actually, before I get to my question, you and I wrote this show with our friends Glenn David Gold and Ali Chen and Bree Williams. I think most of whom, if not all of whom, are here tonight. So hello, hi. Some really terrific people worked on this show. But you came to me with this show idea 5 or 6 years ago, I think. And I don't think I've really asked you this directly, but like, why this idea? Like, what did this come out of? Was it wanting to write LA? Was it wanting to write these voices? Did you have the story already?
For me, a lot of the times it starts with literally a person's voice.
Mm-hmm.
The previous show I created before this was Alice Isn't Dead, which came out of watching the actor Jessica Nicole perform on stage something I had written, and it was an intoxicating experience. I wanted to write so much more for her, and the file for that podcast is still just called Jessica Podcast in my computer.
Mm-hmm.
And starting here, I really love Molly's voice and I love Lucia's voice, and I really thought they'd be amazing together. And then we had T on Night Vale, and those three voices together really were interesting to me. And I didn't have a story or anything else yet. I just knew I really liked those three voices together. And then, I don't know, an LA mystery is really interesting to me, both because I love the city and then also because mysteries are so specific and so technical and so outside of what we had done that it seemed exciting to try to learn how to write one.
Yeah, I agree. Do we have questions out here? I see you right there in the whitish coat. Hello.
Just
great
having
microphone.
listened to this, it's such a it has such an intimate knowledge of Los Angeles. What's your either one of you? What's your favorite thing about the city?
Yeah, I my love of the city kind of grew. My family goes back here several generations, and we used to drive to Arcadia to visit my grandma. And I really, I found it very stressful. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I really started to appreciate it. And now I live like a couple blocks from where my great grandfather lived, and I don't know. It just for me, because of growing up here, it feels like home in a way that nowhere else I've been in the world feels like. And so I have no objective argument for the city. It's just subjectively, it's in me in some way. You did not grow up here.
I did not. I grew up in Texas. I grew up in a suburb of Dallas. And then I lived so much of my life in New York, and a lot of that in New York City, and so I'm definitely a New York kid. But I've sort of learned over the years of getting to travel some and going to different cities, whether it's like a big fancy city like London or New York or Los Angeles, or whether or not it's just, like a common, like smaller city like Charlotte or Cleveland or something like that. So I find that my enjoyment comes from whenever I can spend some time in a city. And I think my love for LA was similar to my love for New York. It was when I spent more than just a couple of days here, and I just got to spend time in a neighborhood. And getting to not have to do touristy things or like have to have fancy dinners or drive all over town just to spend some time. You walk to a park and you go to a grocery store and you come back to your friend's house. And having that, I think, really gave me a sense of how LA is so many different places. And it's so different from New York, but it's also so similar in that way too, that you find your neighborhood and your place. And there's a real beauty in that. You right here.
I think there's a mic coming your way.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And I'm curious about where music fits into your process. Is it really early? Are you like writing with music in mind? Is it you just have a script and people read and then you figure out music afterwards? I'm kind of curious how that happens.
We've been working with Disparition for so many years since we started Night Vale in 2012. And it really helps to already have a musician that you're really comfortable with and have been working with for so long. And he also did the music for Alice Isn't Dead for Joseph's other fiction podcast. And yeah, he just sort of understands the voice and understands the way in which we write and the types of the way we tell a story, like the longer, less dialogue and more long form single narrator storytelling. And he's so good at not just the music and the ambiance, but there's little subtle textures in there of like sound effects that aren't sound effects that sort of heighten the effect of what the music is doing. So yeah, the real key is just having somebody that you know in the end is going to hear what you're doing, and they're going to make a thing that you will have so few notes about.
Yeah, that's the big thing is we've worked with Dispersion for so long that it's just trust. Like I don't always know what it's going to sound like, but I trust that sound.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens after the writing.
Yes.
Yeah,
The
and
music happens after the writing.
And to not make it sound super magical, I mean, once we sort of had scripts in place, like not finalized, we started talking with Desperation about ideas, and he started building out kind of a folder, like a shared folder. I mean, like, I'm gonna just drop some things in here, and so these are some thoughts that I
So
had.
like
and
7 different theme song ideas.
yeah,
was
we had a
fun.
bunch of different theme song ideas, like some kind of different motifs that gave us a sense of what type of thing that was gonna be. Over here.
Hi. First of all, It Devours is one of my favorite books ever. It
thanks.
just like
Thank you
made
so
my
much.
brain explode so hard. And I really appreciate how you guys just create this world that makes me feel like so much is creatively possible. And I'm really curious about, like, because there's such a strong creative voice that's so unique, and you're also like working with Audible. I'm just kind of curious about like money, like how do you like it's to me that's really unusual for there to be like a protected creative vision. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just curious about like that trajectory and how you protect that or navigate like the business side.
Yeah, I mean, money is something that has definitely gotten harder for what we do. I mean, I don't know if it's gotten harder or we just got really lucky once, because Night Vale was never meant to be a job. It was just a thing we were doing for fun that blew up, and then we tried to build stuff with that momentum. But it's definitely hard to build something this intricate and throw it into the world with nothing behind it. And so that was sort of the beauty of Audible, why we went this direction was we went this direction because there was that protected vision of it gave us the resources to pay all these people what they were worth, which is not always an easy thing to do. And then we knew that they were going to let us make the show we wanted to make because, I mean, because it's not really like a charity thing. You know, we just, we've made some successful shows, so they trust us to do it again. And so we kind of had that freedom.
Yeah, and there was never really any point where anybody higher up was giving us notes on what they, more car chases. Like, that was just never a thing that was really happening. So everybody was really supportive, and maybe some of that is Audible, and maybe some of that is from us being able to pitch a very clear vision of what the show would be. Obviously, like, people had thoughts and ideas and sort of wishes about different things here and there, but like there was never any point where somebody was like, you cannot put that in the show, or it must include this in the show. I have right here on the aisle.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm curious how you guys go from hearing specific voices and knowing that you're going to have them in a story to developing the actual story. Like, what happens in between there?
That's a great question.
It really is.
Part of the answer is I wish I remembered. I'm not often like paying enough attention during maybe if I paid enough attention, it wouldn't happen. I don't know. Yeah, in this case, I had voices and a location and a mystery, and there was I usually just start trying to write it. With the show Alice Isn't Dead, I had like 2 scripts before I had any idea what the show was about. I just started writing in that voice to try to figure it out. With this one, I did some riffing. I definitely sent you some stuff where you're like, I don't really get that. I was like trying to do, I forget what it was.
Yeah.
I think I was trying to make it a lot more Jewish. because that's always my instinct with a story, and you just didn't really understand it. And I'm like, that's fair. I think this one had a few false starts, but ultimately, I sent you a version of this episode,
Yeah.
and then
We kind of went back and forth on like balancing monologue versus dialogue in the show. Like,
that was the
a
thing you
big
really brought
question.
to it. Is I really was thinking monologue because that's what I had done, and you started transitioning some of those scenes to dialogue, and it really opened up. I mean, watching it live was super exciting because
Yeah.
getting to see them play that,
Yeah.
it was definitely the right choice.
I think for both of us, in response to your question about like how you write for that, like how does that affect your writing of it? I feel like you said this to me once a long time ago when we were talking about it. It's a similar thing is that it's something along the lines of like you just sort of amuse yourself, or you like crack yourself up sometimes. So sometimes you just sort of hear Lucia Struss saying Lou's lines, and we know Lucia really well because we've known her for 12 years or whatever. We've seen her on stage, and we've performed with her on stage and things like that. And so there's a thing where, like, yeah, you sort of crack yourself up, or you amuse yourself, or you think of a line that Molly or TL can say that you're like, that I know that voice, and I know that's gonna really be moving. And yeah, so maybe not always cracking yourself up, but like you hear the voice in a way that makes it not feel like your own writing. Does that make sense? Like it's become when somebody else performs your words, they're not yours anymore, and you can feel it being somebody else's. And if you already know what that sounds like, you can step outside of your own writing. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Why did you decide to set it in Azusa specifically, and how has that become a character in the rest of the narrative?
It's a great question. I always found Azusa kind of a fascinating place, partly because of the A to Z in the USA, which turns out to have nothing to do with why it's called Azusa. That was retroactively a thing they put. It's either an actual Native American name, or I think it might be just one of those ones that's meant to sound that way. Azusa also, I think, has a big Bible college, which I always find kind of, when you're a Jew growing up in a like very Republican part of Southern California, you get real fascinated with evangelical Christianity because it's all around you. And I don't. It just is an interesting place to me.
I just was following along. I don't know Southern California. I've learned so much about the Los Angeles area.
Yeah, there was
doing this.
there was a lot of script edits where I'm just like, the drive wouldn't take that long.
Yeah. Yep.
I think we're kind of at time. Do we have one more question?
Let's do one more. Right there on the aisle.
Hey,
Hi there.
I was curious, how did you guys settle on this sort of first-person narrative shifting accounts over something that was maybe more dialogue-driven or sound effects-driven?
It's always been, since we started writing together back in 2010, 2009, whenever Joseph and I first started working on plays together, and then later podcasts when we made Night Vale, we both sort of bonded over the idea of solo storytelling. And it's our favorite way to consume a story. I love great dialogue. I love, fast pace, the clippy dialogue of things like Thrilling Adventure Hour, but there's something about just a single person on a microphone, or not, at a campfire with a flashlight under their chin telling a story about a hook and the door handle or whatever. Like, that type of storytelling is really moving and affecting, and with a good storyteller that goes, for me, and I think for Joseph too, goes so much farther than any other style. And so when we made Night Vale, we just went with solo storytelling. We move in dialogue sometimes, but that was what stuck with us, and that happened with Alice Isn't Dead. That happened in my other podcast, Within the Wires. I just love the solo storytelling. So when we approached this one, there's a smattering, as you saw tonight, of little bits of dialogue between Lou and Molly, but just love the single storyteller mode more than anything else.
There's a playwright named Ed Schmidt, I believe. I've seen a lot of theater in New York over the years I lived there, but this might have been the best play I ever saw. It was performed in his apartment living room to an audience of, I think it was like 6 to 10 people, I don't remember. And what it was is he had been a working playwright, and he had decided to quit being a playwright. And he told you the story of why, and you sat in his living room for about an hour and a half while he sat a few feet away from you and told you this story. And it was just so memorable. It sticks with me to this day, and I saw it 8 years ago. And so I think a lot of times with podcasting, I'm just trying to recreate that feeling of how incredibly immersive a single person sitting a few feet from you and just telling you a story can be.
Well, thank you all so much for having us and listening. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great night.